Good evening and welcome to the collective here on WSME Enlightenment Radio. I hope that you've had the opportunity to check us out. The show, this one, is on Sundays at 6 p.m. So let everybody know that this is where I am and it's called the collective. So, in lieu of us being just a few days away from a big change for the United States, specifically the election, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. And we all know that people are very divided in the United States, and we've got record number turnouts as far as voting is concerned. So today's show, I talked to, and I was very fortunate to get as a guest, the Greater New Haven NAACP branch president, Dori Dumas. So Dori, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
This is crucial. This is one of the most important elections I know in my lifetime.
Yes.
And so what is the NAACP's effort to get the vote out?
Right. So as you know, registering people is something we do year round.
Right.
And not just for presidential elections. So we have been deep into the community. We have partnered with so many people. We've been in the areas that have traditionally low turnout, registering people. We've had, Spanish and English voter registration forms. And our goal was to go where the people were, talk to them, encourage them, and really let them understand how important this election is and how it affects them, and that they needed to use their voice and their power. So we've done that. We've been doing that, and we've been doing it all over, not just New Haven, but the Greater New Haven area.
Yeah,
so
county, right?
Yeah. So, but that's a very important part. And a lot of times, you have to go and meet people where they are. Yeah. And you have to make it relatable. And so we've done that. We've talked to them. So we really tried to get people engaged and excited and understanding this is crucial. This is a critical election. We did the same thing with the census. But now that we are at this part, what we're doing is working very hard. We have a whole get out the vote effort. It starts on Saturday. So Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, we are going to various communities throughout the city. We're going to be putting, we have palm cards and door knockers reminding people that the election is Tuesday. Do you need a ride? Make sure you know where your polling station is. We're going to have people that can pull up in case people don't understand or know where they're supposed to go.
Yeah.
So we're actually, we're going to be doing it with masks on and our hand sanitizer.
Practicing social distancing, absolutely.
Not going into anyone's home, but we will knock on doors and stay, a distance. But we do feel like that's important in certain communities. Like they need to see people, hear people. And we'll be doing that and we'll be making calls. We have a whole
so you have a call bank?
Yep, we're doing phone banking and canvassing, and that's on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And then the day of the election, our office, which is 1389 Chapel Street, becomes a hub, and we will be having volunteers come in. We'll be going to the polls. We also have Yale School of Music. Some of them are going to be playing music to kind of keep people motivated and upbeat at a couple of the polling stations in New Haven. We'll be visiting them to make sure that there's, encouraging people if there are long lines to, be patient, stay in line. We'll bring water. Our goal is to take every excuse off the table. Encourage people, but also be there as support. So now say somebody's having problems and there are some issues at our polling stations, which we have had in the past.
Yes.
Then we will be troubleshooting. We have, the NAACP has hotlines. The state has a hotline. So if anybody has any kind of issues or if things don't feel right, something going on at the polls, we also will be troubleshooting and getting right to, because there's several lawyers ready to answer our questions, to help us through any issues we may have at any of the polling stations in the Greater New Haven community. So we are geared up. We're fired up. and we're ready. We'll be collaborating with several people across the board. I mean, people are coming. This year, it's quite different because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
And we understand that. But we're telling people, we have wipes to be wiping down any area. And our office is very big. We're very fortunate at the new sickle cell house that has several different rooms. So we can just put a couple of people in different areas and really have them to social distance so they can make the calls that way. We also will be sending people out, in groups so that they can hit different communities with our literature. And our literature, because, we're nonpartisan, so we are not promoting any specific candidate at all. Our goal is to get people to the polls. Vote. Yes, and to use their voice and their power. Now, we have had forums and we've participated with several forums throughout this election cycle and season where we talk about issues. Now, if people listen in, we do talk about things that are of interest to them. So we can say, if this is something that you care about and this candidate is talking about X, Y, and Z, we do that. And we can do that, but we cannot support a specific candidate. But we do let people know what issues are. And if they have concerns, we do the research and we let them know, well, this is, a candidate that supports things you're talking about. And what we need people to understand that every aspect of their life is controlled by the vote. Because
I was going to ask you, do people understand what their vote means? Because I think it's one thing to tell folks, go out and vote.
Yeah.
But I don't think that they fully understand what their vote means or what it contributes to.
Right. And so those are the kind of conversations when we go into the communities or people or come to us that we talk to them about. One of the main things we've been talking about lately is around healthcare. I mean, every issue, but people can relate to healthcare because unlike previous years, a lot of people have been affected by COVID-19.
Yeah.
Now, in the Black community, anything that's going on, we are going to get it. People in our community get it at the highest rates and numbers. Diabetes, sickle cell, heart, issues, almost anything, asthma. We always have it larger numbers in our community. But with COVID-19, even younger people. So when we talk to them about healthcare and health coverage and access to the best healthcare, and the candidates are talking about increasing that and keeping that, and the ones that are talking about cutting it. And so that if you end up in the hospital, your family member ends up in the hospital, you want to make sure that they can actually get in, that they'll get the best doctor and get the best care. People understand that, yes, it matters because you have people who want to turn back the clock, take some of your rights away, people who don't care about if you're covered with health care, who don't care if your children, if the achievement gap gets bigger and how are we going to fix this. So, we try to talk to them about specific things that affect them and their immediate circumstance. And I think that helps them to relate to, because if you don't vote for this or don't vote for this person, that this specific candidate does not care about healthcare, does not care about services that help you in your community, then that's probably a way for you to have your voice heard and maybe in bigger numbers, then that candidate will get voted out or will not win. And so that's the way we try to talk to them. We talk to them about college, about jobs, about housing. You want better roads look at the roads in our area. You want them better. And all politics really are local. So although it is a critical election, and of course, we're all, we're counting down. And I have to say, I'm very anxious about the whole thing, but I will be so busy that hopefully that day will come. And then, whatever the results are, my personal opinion, I'll keep that off of this station. But, we'll just see what happens. But there's a lot to be done. And so we just want people to care enough, show up, and have a voting plan. New Haven and Greater New Haven area, they may not have as long of lines that you see all over the country, but because in some areas they have had a lot of absentee ballots, ever because of COVID-19, but New Haven has not. Our numbers are still pretty low compared to across the state. So there may be lines. There won't be lines as long as I believe you've been seeing
them everywhere else, right?
But we need people to be patient. So we'll be visiting the different homes. We'll try to have water, we'll have gloves. So if people want to, have something to drink while they're waiting, or, we're just trying to make it easier. And again, we're knocking on doors. We're offering rides. We are offering rides. At first, we were a little nervous about it, but we have vans where people can social distance.
Okay.
We'll have wipes. We'll have, hand sanitizer. And we will be wiping down, as people are coming in and out. So we're trying to be safe, smart, but not let any of that be an excuse for people not turning out to vote, to have their voices heard.
So I know that by ballot yesterday was the last day to register to vote.
So, okay, so not the last day to register online. Mail in your ballot and have it postmarked by the 27th. So that is absolutely correct. However, it's never too late in a presidential election, because if you find people, and they have to be patient, that have not registered, but they want to be able to vote, they still can, but they have to go in person to the registrar's office.
And what do they need to bring? Do they need to bring some forms of ID or?
Yes, the best form of ID is a Connecticut driver's license or ID. Okay. However, they will take, if you have bills with your name and your address, that is acceptable, and they will accept that as a form of ID. Okay. To eliminate any issues, if you do have some kind of Connecticut issued ID, that is best. So please try to bring that. If not, and you have a cable bill or electric bill or something, and it has your name and your address, they have and will accept that.
Okay. And you can actually register to vote until the 3rd, the day of.
Yep. You have to go to the registrar's office. And you have to be patient, because they're going to be dealing with a lot, but they do have to register you. And as long as you are in line, even if it's later in the evening, and it's after 8, which we're not encouraging anyone to do, you have a right to vote, and your vote will be counted, and you can register that day.
Well, that's just like a few years back. I'm sure you remember what happened at City Hall.
Yes.
And they
registered. I know what happened in Hampton, where a lot of Quinnipiac students were not allowed to cast their vote, even though they were in line. So we have definitely been reminded. We are well aware of that, and that happened at the last presidential election.
Correct.
And they shut people down, which they should not have. And I know they are addressing that, and they will be staying open later, and they'll let people still have their votes counted, and they can cast their vote. So we have addressed that, and the Secretary of State, she's addressed it, and with all the various registrars. Mm-hmm. So we don't expect that to be an issue this time, because they definitely are well aware, and they have people watching and ready to address it.
And speaking of which, what is the plan for voter suppression? Because I know that in some parts of the country, it is a lot more open than it is, say, in certain cities in Connecticut. I've never seen it in my time as a reporter or somebody just, as a regular citizen standing in line. I've never seen voter suppression in my polling place.
Right. But and I haven't seen it in mine. Right. So what happens and depends on the community. So people move a lot, and sometimes in certain communities. And so what could happen is that person is not on the roll, or not with that address, or shouldn't be at that polling station. That's not really voter suppression, but issues like that come up. And so what we do have, which is a direct connection, like I said, to the hotline. If we did have anything that did not feel right, is not comfortable, person feels like they're not allowed to vote for whatever reason, we have attorneys available and ready.
Okay.
NAACP. And so we have a hotline number there, and we also have the hotline number for the Secretary of State. And we're saying, if you see something, say something. So somebody's seeing anything. Again, we don't see a whole lot of it in Connecticut, period. That does not mean it does not happen, because it wasn't the last election, but the election before that, we did have issues and we did have to call attorneys. And so it happens from time to time. Very rare, but we're prepared for it. So we should say that, in other places, and it's mostly in Black communities, they should have more polling stations. And what they don't do is they have one, and that's why you see all the long lines, right? And and not everyone has the luxury to stand in line for hours to vote. So that is a form of voter suppression. We don't, like I said, even in Connecticut, at the busiest polling stations, you're not going to be there for hours and hours and hours. So we don't foresee that happening here. But should it happen, we have numbers, we have hotlines, we have attorneys, we have people ready to come in and to support, help, and figure it out. And so, we're ready for that.
Because the last time I saw a huge line was at Lincoln Bassett School. I think it was the 2016 election. And folks had gotten the robocall from Obama. So the line was literally around the school. So it's interesting that you say that there should be more polling stations.
Right. And so that is part of suppression. If you know that you have an area where there are a lot of people registered, based on the numbers, that's how many polling stations you should have. And so that's how they do it. And that's how they figure out how many they should have. Now, if there's a polling station and there's a high turnout every year, and then the lines are getting longer and longer, then that's an indication. And people should share, like, I had to stay this line. Like, you need to be talking about it, talk to your representatives, talk to people so that in Connecticut, we can see about, is there a need for an additional polling station? Now, what you're seeing across the country as people are trying to block the votes is they'll have a major area which would have like high turnout and have one polling station. And that's where you're seeing numbers where people are waiting 2, 3, 4, and 5 hours sometimes to vote. And that is part of voter suppression and people trying to block the votes and discourage people from voting. That's just one way. There's several ways they do it, but that is certainly one way.
One way. That's very common.
It's in communities of color. And so that's why we know that and that's another indication why we know how important our vote is, because people wouldn't work so hard for you not to be able to vote. Yes. And they'll make it easier. And I do think, and I'm an advocate for whatever it takes to help people, we need to make it easier. So if Connecticut should revisit early voting, again, we don't tend to have the issues that a lot of the states have.
But why is that, Dori? Is it because of our size?
I think it's because of our size. And I think that we work closely to try to avoid some of the things. And we've been successful. However, we have not been successful with early voting being passed. But I don't think that maybe perhaps in the future, in near future, it may come up again. And I think that it could possibly pass where we can even have early voting in Connecticut, which we do not, other than, the absentee ballot option. You cannot vote early in Connecticut, but it may, we'll see. I think it'll be very telling when we see the numbers and the data from what happens on Election Day 2020, how we move forward.
Yeah, because 51% of the country has already voted.
Yes.
And so that to me tells that there are a lot of people who are finally vested in their vote.
Yeah. And in Connecticut, I heard numbers today where Stanford had very high numbers with, and as you know, so I think it depends on the areas, but, I'm just hoping, like I said, I care about people voting in general, but I specifically care about my greater community. Yeah. And they have not done a lot of absentee ballots. So I'm hoping that means because they plan to be out there in person. Yeah. And I'm hoping that our numbers are higher because when, in general, other than when President Obama ran his first time, I think in numbers and turnout are still extremely low, very low for people who are eligible to vote versus how many people actually turn out.
Really?
Now, no, his was the highest ever.
Okay.
Ever. I'm saying, but since then,
they've been very low.
And it still was low, not low. It was higher than ever. So it was over 60% of the people who were eligible. But normally, sometimes we're down to 20, 30% people who are, it's really, it's very sad and concerning when you look at the real data of how many people in our general area who are eligible to vote versus how many people actually get out to vote. And so when people see us working so hard, sometimes I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because, I know other people who listen maybe to your station may know. We're trying to get to the people who are not looking at the news, who don't not as engaged, who don't maybe understand how much it affects them. That's our targeted audience, because a lot of times, of course, we're encouraging each other, we're pumping each other up, but 90% of the time, a lot of the people we're talking to, they're going to probably vote. It's the people who are not listening, who are not engaged, who, don't even look at the news. Sometimes, and with social media, with streaming stations, people, it used to be a time you couldn't, you had to see campaigns and commercials and stuff, but you can avoid all of that and not see any of it. And a lot of people, so we should never assume that everyone understands how important it is, that everyone cares about it, or knows about it. So we go with that mindset. Let's just go to the people who we know may not have that much interest and get them registered. And they've already been registered because we worked on that part, but get them to the poll.
Yeah, because I think especially in our larger cities where we have true urban communities, there's always a myth about voting. But it doesn't do anything. It's not effective. Why should I do it? Nobody cares about what I think. It's not going to make a difference.
Yeah.
And so consequently, we still lag.
Even
if we have registered voters, it's getting those people to the polls.
Yes. And so a lot of what we've done this year is we've gotten a lot of the college students and younger people too, so that when we're registering people, it's not, people their age, people that know more. So it's helpful. The people will be sending out, hopefully they can relate to the people that they're trying to encourage. I'm just hopeful, I'm hopeful that we'll get a better turnout. I'm hoping that people will understand how important it is. I'm hoping that once they do, we go through the process of the election on Tuesday, that people then also understand that the next part of it is holding the elected officials accountable. And the way you do that is show up at meetings, talk to them. Like, you don't want to just see your person once a year when they're running again or something like that. You want to make sure the people who are representing you, from the alderperson to the mayor to whoever, the senators, that you see them, that they're talking about things you care about in your community. And if they're not doing that, then their seat should not be safe. They can get kicked off get somebody else. You run.
Yeah.
Young people should run. People of color should run. Women should run. If people don't feel like the ones that are in office represent them, care about them, then we encourage people, then you should run. And so their seat's not safe and they can get elected out. It's just same way they were elected in.
All right. We are going to take a break here. My guest on The Collective is Dori Dumas, and she is the president of the Greater New Haven branch of the NAACP. We'll be back. And welcome back to The Collective here on WSME Enlightenment Radio. My name is Michelle Turner, and I have the good fortune of being the host. On today's program, we have Dori Dumas, and she is the president of the Greater New Haven branch of the NAACP. And we're discussing being prepared, being ready to vote, and how important the vote is. A few minutes ago, you said something about the reason why our vote, African American vote, is so important, or it must be important, is because it's always trying to be suppressed. So, while we know that African American women turn out in droves to vote, it seems that there is a push to divide our community by gender and pull the African American male vote into the Republican voting rolls. Have you heard this, seen this?
I have heard a little about that. I don't believe that to be true. And it may be true in small numbers. I think people say and use things as distractions. But I know that Black women always have led, and we do lead. But it's important for Black women, and let's get this message out, make sure your whole household, make sure you're calling your family members. If that can be or may be an issue, then Black women, don't just go yourself, bring 5 people with you and make sure you're calling your family members. So have I heard that? Yes, not a lot, but a lot of it, I think it's just, they find people who, they can tell them almost anything. They put a microphone in front of them, and I just think it's distractions. And I don't want to buy into that or believe it. I believe Black women lead, yes, but Black women also have the power to bring others along with them. And so Black women, historically, we have been showing up to the polls. We show up and show out, but it's not enough. And it's part of we have to own that. We have to bring our community with us, including our Black men, our children. And I think it's a good idea for mothers, if they can, bring your children with you so that they see you voting. I think we have to change the narrative. I think we have to, be the role models so that people understand. And I think doing that, like, I don't recall going to the polls with my parents or grandparents, but I think it's important in these days that we do that we bring them with us if we're able to. Not everyone has the luxury to do that, and I know that. But if you can bring either your children, your teenagers, if you can make sure that your college students and young men and women are voting, and start younger, encouraging how important it is, then I think it's going to be easier for us to encourage people to actually turn out and vote.
Yeah, because I think what I see and what I hear are definitely two different things.
Yes.
It has always been my observation that African American women usually bring their whole household to the polls.
Yes.
I've come out of my polling places where I've lived around Greater New Haven, and there's always a mom, a dad. Some people can bring their children, do bring their children. I've seen single moms with the babies in their arms, taking them to vote. So I'm not so sure if the divisiveness is something that, I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I just don't know how strongly it exists.
Yeah, and I agree. And so I don't like to give it a lot of energy. But what I do want to say is, if that is out there, then let's show up, show out, and bring our men, our young men, our husbands, our brothers, our sons with us. I have always made it so voting to me, and not just because I'm with the NAACP, I registered to vote. I worked in downtown New Haven in high school. And they used to register people right there on the green. And so I registered at 18, and I've never missed an election. And I think part of that was teachers, even in my school. And I went to James Hill House High School, and it depends on who is talking to you about the issues and what's important to you. And so I always knew, even at a young age, and I've never missed an election. And I'm proud of that. And I get it. And I want other people to get it. And I think we have to start young, talk about it often, share why it's important, make it relatable to the people who need to turn out. And Black women, let's bring our families. In my house, when my children were here and they were eligible to vote, we all went together. My husband and I have forever gone together. That's just what we do. And not because of, anything else. It's just what we do. But in the last, elections, because the NAACP, and I don't want to be one of those people, I'm always talking to people and talking about what's important, but I don't model that. So I said, if you're going to talk about it, you got to be about it.
Right.
So I always make, and I remember, especially when I had to work or whatever, getting my son up early in the morning because, I like to be first. Let me get it in. And he was not happy. He always wanted to vote, but he didn't want to be up at 6. Like, we're trying to be at the polls early. But I'm like, oh no, especially for presidential elections, especially when it was, the first Black president running, I'm like, oh no, we're going to do this together. We're going to as a family. And so, it wasn't an option for him. Like, you don't have to like that you get up early, but you are.
You're going.
So, and he never had an issue with voting. He just didn't necessarily like my timeline. But I just think, the same way we say other things to our children and teaching them, I think it's how we model and what we say and do we give it value? And I think if Black women give it value, then your children will pick up on that. And I think male or female. And I definitely think we should be doing more of that and not just talking about how important it is, around election time.
Right.
When issues come up, when legislation is going forward, when it's issues that we care about, then I think we need to know if it's something going to be going, our senators or our representatives, or even locally, our school boards, we need to show up. We need to understand and we need to have our voices heard. And so maybe not just making this election, which it is critical and a crucial election, highlight things that they can relate to. If you care about, you need more jobs, more training, more opportunities, you need, better housing, better streets, whatever you care about. You driving around your city and your potholes are messing up your tires, whatever young people care about. Then that's you, and you can say this is the people who are voting on these things. This is the places you can go to have your voice heard.
Right.
And so I think we should do that and more of that. And I see more groups are doing that. And I think that's a smart way to do it.
Well, my daughter always liked getting the vote. I had voted sticker.
Yeah.
So that was always, for some strange reason, when she was very small, that was like her reward. She was very proud to have the sticker and go to school. So I know it's trouble getting them up when they're young and you're working and trying to do different things. And they do appreciate it later on because I do have a registered voter in my house and I'm very proud of that. So
absolutely. I have to say, my son, who now lives in Arizona, and they can vote early, he voted on Monday. My daughter, and I have a grandchild, they voted today. And my granddaughter had her sticker, and my daughter made a little video that said, "We voted," not "I voted." We voted, so it's important. And I think we have to pass that tradition on, make it a big deal, make it feel like it matters. And more of us talking about it, more people, especially younger people, engaged about it and understanding it and know the power of it. I hope that the direction will be going up and that the numbers will be going up.
What are you hearing as far as what the issues are? We discussed earlier that for most voters, especially in the Black and Latino and Hispanic communities, healthcare is an issue. But what are the other things that you hear voters talking about?
Well, especially in New Haven, when we have a high number of immigrants. So immigration is important in New Haven. So we've been hearing a lot about that. I did an event. The NAACP did an event and we collaborated in Fairhaven. And so we had Spanish speaking people and we had people who have been dealing with immigration. So that was a hot topic for us in our New Haven area, and issues around immigration and things that are happening and should be happening. A lot of the other things you hear about is the economy, jobs. Of course, through COVID, it's gotten worse, but like people care, small businesses and, opportunities. So those types of things. And education, the achievement gap, not just the achievement gap, but, recruiting more minority teachers and having quality tools for our students to help reduce the gap that we have. Through COVID, as we know, in New Haven, especially, they have not gone back to the classroom yet. I think they're in about a week or so. But so the gap was already wide, but people are caring, and I'm hearing people saying it's a civil rights issue. Education has always been a civil rights issue. Mm-hmm. And we need to be concerned about what it's looking like and how we can, put more value, more tools, and try to help, close the gap. And especially in the challenging times we are in now, when we know it's widening, that gap is getting wider. So that's a concern. So you hear about several things across the board for people. And again, always jobs, housing. Housing is a big, affordable housing and support in more communities and expanding it, not just in New Haven, but in greater New Haven, where you have some towns pushing back on it. So people, want to be able to have affordable housing and something they can feel proud about in their community. So that's a concern to people. Services, plenty of services that support people, low income people. So that's of concern, especially in New Haven and greater New Haven, and cuts or support. So people are watching that and care about that and want to make sure that the people are hurting. And I mean, as many of us know, through this COVID, so many people are hungry in our community. So many people don't have the means to keep food on the table. And so food insecurity is a big deal, and people are hurting. So you need services and ways for people to be able to feed their families and keep a roof over their head and have jobs and find jobs and, the education for their kids. So, the elderly and our seniors and their programs. So, I mean, that's why we all vote, because there's hardly anything that does not affect us in our community. So people are voting for these things. People are voting for budgets for these programs, right. So those are the things that people care about, and those are the things we talk about.
So if someone needs a ride, how do they get in touch with you? And are you supplying information like, if I live on Newhall Street, where is my polling place?
Yes, we are. So we have, and we actually have a QR code. So people can even just go to our code and that will help them find it, or we'll do it for them. So if they tell us their name and their address, we can pull it up and say, your polling station is, and we have a list of all the polling stations. Okay. So, and we can even tell them what address it is. So yes, we are assisting with that, and we'll be able to do it on the spot. With smartphones and tablets now, you can always do anything, anywhere. People can call our office the day of the election, which is 203-389-7275, or email us. But we're trying to get some of that done in advance, but they can call us the day of, and we'll be available. We have people who are volunteering the entire day. So we'll be giving rides throughout the city. Again, we will be doing as much as we can. Masks will be required for anyone and everyone. Hand sanitizer. We will be wiping down the van and the cars in between rides. So we're trying to take all of the precautions and protocols to make sure to keep our volunteers safe and the people that we're giving rides safe, because safety is first and foremost. We need everyone to stay safe And we're advocating that people understand that's a fight we have. That's a whole nother challenge.
That's another challenge.
So we're fighting. Yeah, we're fighting COVID-19, which is hitting our community in disproportionate numbers, the same way illnesses and other things do. But we also need to make sure that if someone needs a ride, we can give them a ride. They can stay safe. Our volunteers can stay safe, but they get to the polls, and that's the goal.
And I noticed that you all have voting signs around town.
Yes. So we've been putting
those been up.
Yeah, so we've been plastering, and we got tons of signs, and we're trying to get them everywhere. And a lot of the theme this year, which is, I don't know who makes these decisions, whoever does, but it's called Black the Vote. So you'll see a lot of those because we got cases of them. And I guess what they're saying is Black the Vote, meaning our issues are on the ballot. So Black people need to go and vote. I think that's the message. But you'll see a lot of those because we just got a whole shipment of that. So we'll start plastering those all over the city. Black the Vote, Black the Vote, basically meaning Black folks, justice is on the ballot. Civil rights is on the ballot. People think that, first of all, we lost a civil rights icon in John Lewis. And of course, through the Voting Rights Act in 1965 and a lot of the work he did with other civil rights leaders, but there are still provisions that need to be addressed because in 2013, the Supreme Court really took away some of those rights because they're saying that around voter suppression. So we needed to be, so people don't quite even understand that there are things that we had protections around that are no longer there in certain areas where they're notorious for having voter suppression. Excuse me. So we have, we've addressed that, and we need to address that. And we need to keep that in the forefront because that's something we should be pushing for and, making sure. And now, judges, and we have a new Supreme Court justice, which we did not, as an NAACP.
Did you as a whole support that or no?
We absolutely did not. No, we did not. And we felt like it was hypocritical because, of course, when President Obama tried, all the Republicans were like, well, you never do it in the middle of an election, which then the Republicans did, this time around. So that's not something we supported.
36 days.
Yeah. So, but it is what it is, and we have it, and she's going to be here for a lifetime. So we have a fight. It's an uphill battle, and we have to stay engaged. We have to, protest when we need to, speak up when we need to, be at the table when we need to, and understand our power.
Yeah, because during the break, it was just announced that the Supreme Court did or is going to allow the collection of absentee ballots several days after elections, November 3rd, in North Carolina and Pennsylvania. So they're saying that will work in the Democrats' favor. We will see.
It will. It will. Yeah, because they're trying to find ways not to count votes. You have a whole segment of people who will do and try anything not to have people's voices heard, votes count. And that's just unacceptable. That's un-American. And it should not matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. You should care about the actual voting process, and you should care about and respect that everyone has a right to vote. But people don't. They absolutely go completely against that. And these are some of the people who say they stand on certain values, but I'm like, where's the value? Because that's unacceptable that you would try to block someone's vote.
Right. And it is our civic responsibility.
It is absolutely our civic responsibility.
I go back to, I at one point was young and traveling, and my friend introduced me as an American, and I was very insulted by that. But after having a lot of thought about that and knowing that, like, I'm sure in your family, you have generations of folks who served in the armed forces so that you could have these rights.
Right.
You have people who were hard work and salt of the earth, so to speak, folks who really believed in this country's ideals and did not get to share in them like you and I did.
Exactly.
So when I think American nowadays, I think more of civic responsibility than necessarily an allegiance. And it doesn't mean I hate the United States. What I'm saying is I think that most Americans don't understand that it's a civil responsibility. It's your civic responsibility to vote.
It's one of the most basic fundamental rights that we have. It's one of our basic fundamental rights. And voting is the cornerstone of our democracy.
Absolutely.
And it's so important, and it matters. It matters. And not voting, it's just not acceptable. And I mean, I really don't. I do understand, and I do know people have been discouraged. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think we have to be more progressive in our thinking, and we have to think about the sacrifices that were made. We always had the right, but of course, through intimidation and fear and death and you name it, beat downs and dogs and you name it. Yeah, so we stand on the shoulders of people who sacrificed so much, who had so much courage. And that's not that far removed.
No, it's not.
55 years ago that, our people that looked like us and Black people and brown people could not go to the polls. And if they did, they would lose their jobs or, the intimidation, the fear, the horror of it all that people went through so that we could exercise our right to vote. And it was a great sacrifice and a lot of courage. And so we should never take it for granted. It is nothing to be taken lightly. It is our civic duty. We have earned it, we deserve it, and we should use it. And that's what we do.
I think that's the biggest thing for young people to understand, that as you sit, somebody else has done the legwork.
That's
and
right.
So to honor that legwork, you should practice your civic responsibility.
Absolutely. And keep encouraging others behind that are younger than you to do the same. Yes.
So Dori, about to wrap this up, got about 35 seconds. Give the phone number, please. Tell the hours that you all are going to be available.
So election day, we will be available from 10 o'clock to 7:30 because we're having all our volunteers to do their voting early and get that done. And so we'll start. Our office is 1389 Chapel Street, and our telephone number is 203-389-7275. And we will be offering rides, and we'll be in the community too. So if people somehow, we'll be riding around, you need rides, knocking on doors, but it is better if they give us a call so that we can schedule them for the ride and make sure that they're all set to get to the polls.
All right. Dori Dumas, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Time and energy.
No problem.
Dori Dumas is the president of the Greater New Haven branch of the NAACP. Yes. And this has been The Collective with me, Michelle Turner. And I thank you all for joining us this evening. Have a good one.